Hello, everyone, and welcome to our week 5 of organizational theory. I'm happy to be here again with you for this week. I hope that you are enjoying the class, that the class is proving insightful and interesting and fun. And for this week, we have an interesting discussion. I promise that this week's discussion will be shorter, even though I know I always say that. But I do promise this one will be shorter because it has to be shorter, because I made sure of it, and I have less slides, and so I'll cut you a break for this week and make it a shorter presentation, but also an interesting one that I think will help you for this week's assignments and going forward. So we're going to be discussing the importance of organizational design and strategy. And what is strategy? What does it mean to be strategic? And then we're going to be talking about changing the importance of organizational design and strategy in a changing global environment. So how do we manage the external drivers, those external factors that affect organizations, right? How do we manage those changes in the environment to help us navigate through those unforeseen situations, right? So that's the first part. And then the second part, which is chapter 9, talks about the role of technology and how to use technology in organizations to produce the outputs that we want to produce, whether those outputs are say, for example, products in the case of a private sector organization, or a service in the case of a public agency, for example. So let's get started and talk about some of these things. Okay, so first thing is talking about strategy and the environment. Strategy is known as a specific pattern of decisions and actions that managers take to use core competencies to achieve a competitive advantage and outperform competitors. Okay, so it's what can I do differently, better, more efficient, more effectively, okay, than my competitor to get an upper hand. Okay, that is strategy. So in a nutshell, of course, but it's not just actions, it requires thinking and planning and decision making and then reviewing, and so it's a process, right? It's an entire process of being strategic, right? And being strategic also involves other actions as well. These core competencies that we talk about here are the skills and abilities in value creation. So this is what's important here. Remember, in the previous conversations that we had, I mentioned the importance of leadership and how leaders create value, leaders add value to the organization. So you think about then that an effective leader is one who is strategic, precisely because she is able to add value to a process, to a team, to the organization. So the skills and abilities in value creation that allow a company to achieve superior efficiency, better quality, achieve higher levels of innovation, or innovate, right? Change and innovate, and then do well in terms of customer responsiveness, whether that means sales or whether that means getting reelected. Okay? So those are the core competencies. Now, to this effect, right, the importance of adding value, if we think about the value creation cycle, right, it begins with the ability to obtain scarce resources, right? Think about you are looking for specific skill set and the pool of applicants is minimal, right? Is very small. So the ability to obtain those scarce human resources is a challenge. And if you are able to achieve that, if you are able to to hire these highly skilled individuals, then you are essentially creating value. That's the first step. So the ability to obtain scarce resources, whether it's land, labor, or capital, allows an organization to create what? An organizational strategy. So now the organization sets a path to follow, okay? And that path will in essence, guide the organization in a path to invest resources, right? To develop what? The core competences, the added value, the value creation, the unique skills that your organization's people will possess that others don't, or the unique technology or the unique ability to turn over inputs into outputs, or to analyze data, or to create new products and new models and implement policy, whatever the case may be. These core competences, these then enable the organization to create that competitive advantage, okay? That competitive advantage is what gives you the edge over your competitor, which increases the organization's ability to obtain scarce resources, right? So it's a cycle, right? You can see how this cycle operates. The whole idea in an organization is organize individuals to achieve an objective, but by doing that, you should add value. You should be able to add value. That should be the goal, to add value to a process, to an end result, and that's what organizations are about. Okay, so in this process, we talk about strategy, right? The importance of being strategic and following strategy. So, what is strategy? What are the 4 levels of strategy that the author talks about in this chapter? Well, we have the first one is functional level strategy, and this is a plan to strengthen organization's functional and organizational resources and its coordination abilities in order to create core competences. So it's how do we use the resources collectively in a coordinated manner to create this value, right? Whether that be land, labor, capital. Then you have a business level strategy. This is taking these resources that you have now identified and put together, okay? How are we going to produce a result or a product that will give us a competitive advantage over our competition, whether that be a firm, or whether that would be a political party, or whether that would be a state or a state agency, okay? So what gives us a competitive advantage? You also have corporate level strategy. This is a plan to use and develop core competences so that the organization not only can protect and enlarge its existing domain, but also expand it. So this is much more of a, when we think about strategic, right? A CEO being strategic, well, that means how does this person, this chief executive officer or this general manager, how do they ensure and safeguard the company's assets or the institution's integrity and its reputation with voters, for example, so that it expands into new domains, so that it captures more votes, more supports, or sells more products, or captures a larger market share. Okay. And then, of course, the last one is global expansion strategy, and this is how do we expand, and this is more linked to a private sector firm, but how does a firm expand into overseas markets to obtain scarce resources and develop core competences? So this is what firms usually do when they seek outsourcing, for example, or offshoring, where they're looking for scarce resources that can help them reduce costs or reduce the input cost of a natural resource like oil, for example, or timber, or maybe sugar. Okay, sugar from Latin America is probably cheaper to make confection candy, or something like that. So these are the 4 types of strategies. Okay, now how can we be strategic? Okay, because we think about these 4 levels of strategy, but how can we be strategic? And I'll share this with you to use it as a little tool that you can apply tomorrow. Okay, in your job. Okay, the first one is identify what gives you an edge. So what gives you an edge over your colleague? Think about that for a minute. What gives you an edge over your colleague? What do I do better than my colleague? Okay. Or what do I do that gives me the opportunity to add value to my team, or to the firm, or to the organization? What is it about me that the organization really values and likes and wants? So that when you identify that, and you understand that you are good at it, and that in fact that you are better at it than others, then you should maximize the value by doing that, by promoting, by doing more of it, by focusing more on what gives you an edge. Okay. The second thing that you can do is understand and manage risk. And this is extremely important because it's what separates the great managers from the okay managers, right? The leaders from the just the manager that manages a process. But the leader is somebody, an effective leader is somebody who understands and manages risk, whether it be financial risk, or whether it be product risk, or diversification risk, or internal risks from losing money inside, maybe from people using resources not as efficiently. Okay, throwing away paper, for example. So things like that. So understanding and managing risk. By managing risk, you become strategic. You are being strategic. Okay. And then the last thing that you can do is understand and be able to do a SWOT analysis. This means that you should be able to do a strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threat analysis of yourself, but also of the team and the organization. If you can identify the strength of an organization, of your organization, its weaknesses, you can then identify where you have an opportunity to add value or to gain value, and then by understanding also the threats to you as a person and to the organization, you can address those threats by maximizing your strengths. So it's through your strength that you can counter those threats, right? Whatever makes you strong is what's going to keep you from falling victim to the threats for the organization and for yourself. So this is 3 ways that you can be strategic, and you can start applying this immediately. Okay, so now we go into Chapter 9, and Chapter 9 talks about organizational design, competences, and technology. So here we add the importance of technology. So what is technology? Okay, we all know, we all know what technology is, but if you think about it in the context of organizational theory, organizational design, organizational behavior, the organizational framework, it's the combination of skills, knowledge, abilities, techniques, materials, machines, etc., etc., etc. So it's not just a cell phone. It's not just a cell phone. It's not just a computer, and it's not just a robot that makes the car. It's the whole combination of skills and know-how and ability and techniques. In fact, even the way that you use certain tools. Okay, that's technology. All right. If we think about technology, for example, in the public sector, it takes on a different connotation. And this is where we look at technology from different levels. For example, the individual level is the level of you and me, our personal skills, our knowledge. If you look at the functional level, these are the procedures and techniques that groups follow and perform to create value. And then the third level is at the organizational level, and this is the way an organization converts inputs into outputs. So this is the whole at the organizational level would be its structure, okay? Its structure, its design. So 3 different levels of technology. For example, look at this great picture here that we have, and if you see, this is a UPS truck, and if you're able to identify at the top of the truck, there's a drone, okay? There's a drone, and this is pretty neat, right? And so I'm guessing UPS drives this truck to all over the country, right? All over the world, in fact. But there are some places where it's either not possible for this truck to enter because this truck doesn't have 4-wheel drive, for example, or it's just simply too risky. Again, managing risk, right? Too risky for the products in the truck, too risky for the truck, and then specifically too risky for the person driving the truck, of course, and even the image, etc. So it's better to send that drone with the product and deliver it to these places where this truck is unable to reach, right? So this is a great example of how technology is used to achieve greater organizational effectiveness, right? The input allows the organization to handle relationships with outside stakeholders. The conversion transforms these inputs into outputs. The input is the use of the technology, the manpower, etc. And then the output is the service that's being provided. And the output allows the organization to dispose of these finished goods and services to its external stakeholders, which in the case of UPS would be the client. This process looks like this, okay? The conversion and output process is a very simple process. For those that may have studied managerial accounting, you would have seen this many times in managerial accounting. It's a simple process of where, for example, you are making a shoe, say a Nike shoe, or let's say now you're making a mask, right? The masks that people use these days because of the COVID pandemic. So the input process, right? It's the cloth or the paper, whatever. If it's an the NK95 mask, but if it's a cloth mask, it would be the cloth, it would be the string, it would be the everything that goes into making the mask. Those would be the inputs. The work enters input process. In the conversion process, the human capital, so this is where labor meets the raw materials and converts these raw materials into a finished good, and that is the output process. This is where the work leaves, and that output, that mask, finished good, would then turn into inventory, and then eventually it would get distributed or sold. Okay? So that is what the conversion and output process looks like. Okay, a couple of theories. We have technical complexity, and this is a theory of John Woodward. And the theory is just basically brings up 2 important points. One is program technology, and the other one is technical complexity. Okay, so when tasks can be standardized and the work process can be made predictable, this is program technology. Okay, when this is not the case, right? It usually has to do with the technical complexity. This is the extent to which production processes can be programmed so that it can be controlled and made predictable. But see, not all processes can be made predictable. Not all processes can be technified, or you cannot make everything machine made, right? For example, how do you handle a caseworker that deals with human beings in social services, right? So here comes a single mom with two babies, and she comes to see what aid she can get from the state. How can you make that process standard, right? How can you put a robot on there to speak to this person and arrive at a conclusion as to what this person should receive as far as aid and of course the empathy, etc., that is required in that position. So certain positions, certain jobs, certain roles cannot achieve high technical complexity. So some are low technical complexity, and that's when the conversion process depends on people and their skills and knowledge, and not on machines. We see a lot of this in government, which is why a lot of the government agencies and a lot of the government outputs depend on people and cannot be technified, right? On the other hand, if you're making tires, right? If you're making tires, or if you're making masks, or if you're printing books, all you need to do is press the button for the printer, and then there goes the printer, right? So a lot, depends on the product and the output that is trying to be achieved that will determine the technical complexity and whether you can use program technology or not. And then the second concept is task interdependence. And this is a theory derived by James Thomson. And task interdependence is important also because it gives us an idea of how organizational tasks are related to one another in the organization. And this is determined by the nature of the organization. So the three types of technology, for example, in terms of task interdependence, the three types of technology, for example, in a bank, you would have mediating, technology. Mediating technology is the example from a bank where you have processes where one process is done individually, whereas the long-linked assembly line, the long-linked assembly line technology, that's when you have like an assembly line, like a car assembly line, where making the engine and then the chassis, etc., all of it, one process or one step requires another step before it to continue along the assembly line. So technology is long-linked assembly line. And then the last one is the intensive technology, and this is what we would find in a hospital, for example, where you have a team of various different types of technology all working in unison, in conjunction, to achieve an output, a service. All right? Okay. And then last but not least, I leave you with our thought for the week. Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and He will establish your plans. So if you think about strategy, right? If you think about strategy, which we talked about in this week, the best strategy for us Christians is to commit to the Lord, whatever we do, and He will establish our plans. Now, that doesn't mean we sit and wait for manna to fall from the heavens, right? We have to also do our part. But whatever we do, we commit to the Lord, and things will flow in the way that they should flow and the way that they are intended. If indeed it's in our best interest, and if it's God's will, it will happen and it will flow efficiently and effectively. So that's the best strategy that we can have as Christians, and that's the thought that I leave you for this week. Okay, so thank you very much for your time for this week. As I said, I promised it would be shorter, and it's under 25 minutes, so we did it. Thank you very much. Enjoy the week, and God bless you.